Ferrari that I have ever seen in the whole of my life. He's out of the race! He's out of the race! Oh my goodness, this is fantastic!
And I've got to stop because I've got a lump in my throat.
The second leg of the first triple header of the season has been completed, as has the 2021 Styria Grand Prix, with Max Verstappen taking a dominant win for Red Bull. Hello everyone and welcome back to Maximum Downforce, episode 8 of the Formula 1 2021 World Championship. And joining me as always, Chris Kavaney, Harry Parkhouse and Merisse Baker. Guys, the first of the two races at the Red Bull Ring. A debatable race for some people. Me and Chris saying before the podcast was recorded that we both enjoyed the race thoroughly, whereas Merisse, on the other hand, stating that it wasn't exactly the most exciting race, but on-track battles. But Harry, we didn't get your perspective on the Grand Prix. What do you feel? How do you feel the Grand Prix went in terms of giving us good on-track action and excitement?
Well, I think I sort of touched on it last night that it could have been worse. There were overtakes during the race. Obviously, we looked at Leclerc coming through the pack after the front wing damage on lap 1. He made several overtakes. The Ferraris looked good with race pace, so Leclerc did come through the pack. There were overtakes, there were on-track battles, but a lot of the race was quite stagnant. I think that when Alonso was sort of at the head of a almost 6-7 car train, it was down to almost about Ocon in 15th. So it did create sort of a massive stagnant part of the race, which was the main focus of why I guess people could say it wasn't necessarily a boring race, especially for Austria's standards. I feel that as an overall, yes, we've had better races at Austria, and yes, there probably will be better races further on the track and throughout the season, but it wasn't necessarily the worst race I've seen. There were obviously a couple of overtakes, a couple of defining moments, lap 1 as well. And overall, Max's win was a dominant win, as you said before. So for the championship-wise, it's getting interesting now. So the race has helped that wise. But in terms of racing overall, it wasn't the best, but it could have been worse.
Now, Chris, at the beginning of this season, I don't think anyone would have thought that after two parts of the triple header went forward, that we would be saying that the French Grand Prix was one of the best races of the season. In comparison, Austria was arguably down in the lower half so far out of the 8 races that have been held.
Yeah, I can see that. Equally, compared to previous seasons, a race like this in previous seasons would have been a good one, theoretically, because there's so much is happening this year with a new challenger, not just a new challenger, it's a new challenger for a different team. So, and all this is happening, and Mercedes possibly on the back foot. So it's adding this extra pizzazz to the season. So this kind of race probably looks boring to the previous ones, especially coming off a great one. But if you go to previous years, this probably would have been a good one.
Now, Merisse, Red Bull Racing certainly had a very good race in terms of their on-track pace and how they took it to Mercedes. But overall, it was Max Verstappen who took the race win, and it was Max Verstappen who finished on the podium, the only Red Bull driver to finish on the podium, despite their what appeared to be major advantage over Mercedes. So do you think it was Verstappen's driving which assisted Red Bull in getting this win? Or do you think that Perez's alternate strategy cost him a higher position?
I do think the Red Bull car was the quicker car this weekend. Perez would have finished on the podium if it wasn't for, I say a slow stop, it was around 4.8 to 5 seconds for Perez, which is slow for Red Bull. But without that, he probably would have finished third, a couple more laps. He was right on Bottas's tail. So I really do think it was that the Red Bull car was quicker this weekend. Obviously, Verstappen had more pace than Perez, so, he was able to qualify on pole and then go through and take that win. But I do think we could have seen a first and third place for Red Bull if it wasn't for that, double pit stop for Perez.
And Harry, one thing which I am going to be raising over the next couple of races is the media and certain people who've been reporting on Formula One constantly refer to Red Bull as relevant or worthy title challengers to Mercedes. But has it actually now become the fact that Mercedes are the championship challengers, with Red Bull being the favourite? They lead both championships. Verstappen leads the World Championship, by, I think it's 19 points now, whereas Red Bull lead the Constructors' World Championship by 40 points. So surely after a third of the calendar, we have now got a new team right at the top of the tables.
Yeah, I mean, in pre-season, we saw Mercedes, well, definitely sandbagging and having a horrible pre-season in terms of, for the last 5 years, they've been dominant at the top of the standings in pre-season. And we thought that maybe this year will be the year that we have a challenge from Red Bull. And it looks as though we're 8 races in now, and Mercedes, they look worried about the threat of Red Bull. And I think it's more than just a threat at this point. You will say that with the package overall that Red Bull have, they clearly believe at Mercedes that it is a much better car to have, it being in the Red Bull than in the Mercedes. So, and when you have a driver like Max, a young driver, he's fresh, wanting this first world title, he's obviously going to be more motivated than the likes of Valtteri Bottas in the Mercedes to win this title. But I feel that if you were to choose at this point, you would obviously have to go with the Red Bull as the better package overall. And, well, for more suiting of most of the tracks coming up as well, you would think that the Red Bull would have the advantage over the Mercedes. So you would say that the Mercedes, they are on the back foot. Necessarily in terms of them, their title challenge, it's definitely not over. We know that with Hamilton, and especially if Bottas can find some consistency, obviously on the podium again this weekend, if they can find that consistency and manage to get both cars beating Perez each week, then we could see maybe constructors get a bit closer. But if Verstappen continues this fine form, then I think that the drivers is only heading one way at the moment.
Am I not to interject here as well? I want to say there's an interesting stat that I read yesterday, I believe it was, is that this is the first time in the entire 8-year turbo hybrid era that we're in right now that Mercedes have not won in 4 straight races. That in itself must mean that Red Bull are definitely on the front foot.
And I also believe it's the longest streak for Lewis Hamilton not winning a Grand Prix since Mexico 2017 to Azerbaijan 2018, Chris.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right as well. So when you add those two things together, it must make you think that Red Bull are doing something right. They're for once they're starting a season fast, because in previous seasons they've always started slow, haven't they? So this is a bit different this year, and it's certainly showing.
Now, on the other side of the championship battle, we've talked about how far Red Bull are ahead, appearing to be anyway, of Mercedes. But Mercedes themselves, over the last few years, we've debated ever since 2014, when Mercedes emerged as the dominant force. Rather than focusing on their current performance, we almost immediately shifted to thinking when the dominant force would once again end. Ferrari in 2005, Red Bull in 2014. Merisse, with the performance of Valtteri Bottas at the last few races, and the fact that not even a 7-time world champion in the form of Lewis Hamilton can drag this car up to defeat Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, is this possibly the first sign that Mercedes could be coming down from the top? Or is there some alternate agenda sat in this championship fight?
I think, as you may have seen over the weekend, Toto Wolff has said, we've decided not to develop this car anymore. And, you can't look too much into that because, Mercedes love their mind games and sandbagging. But I think a big part of that team is looking forward to next year and the regulation changes. I don't know how much they'd be willing to sacrifice this year's performance for that, and to sacrifice, the momentum that they're giving to Red Bull because of that. But, Lewis Hamilton said, we need upgrades. We're not going to be able to beat Red Bull without them. So, and it's not just on one track. Red Bull have won the last 4 races. That hasn't happened since 2013. So they really need to, up their game, because it's happening on lots of different tracks. It's not track specific anymore to each car. It's just that Red Bull are faster. So I do think Mercedes' agenda has shifted maybe a bit towards next year and thinking to the future. So I'm not sure how much performance they can really pull back this year. But I think we do want to see them do that. So we have, still a fight down to the wire. But I'm honestly not sure how they're going to do that.
Now, Valtteri Bottas, to start off with the Finn. Chris, he didn't have the best of weekends, considering Austria is considered to be one of his best circuits. He won here in 2017. I believe he was leading at some stage during the 2018 race. He's always been a good driver around the circuit, to the point where in the circuit's history, Valtteri Bottas has actually led the most laps around the circuit. I'm not certain if that is the case anymore, given Verstappen's dominant win, leading every single lap around the Red Bull ring at the weekend. But spinning in the pit lane is really an evident sign that Bottas is not the driver who joined Mercedes in 2017.
You could say that. I mean, it's the first time I've seen something like that happen in any form of Formula for a while. I do think the penalty was somewhat harsh, in my opinion, because it wasn't exactly like he did anything intentional. It wasn't flagrant. So I believe anything that's flagrant could be a 3-place penalty. And if they weren't so harsh, then he would have been in second, wouldn't he? I think. And then his race might have been completely different. Who knows? But again, all that could have been erased if he didn't do a stupid error. So the writing probably is on the wall after that.
And meanwhile, at Mercedes, on the other side of the garage, Lewis Hamilton is insistent, Harry, that Red Bull have either a brand new upgrade to their rear wing or some form of new Honda upgrade. Now, meanwhile, on the other side, up in the management, Toto Wolff has admitted that it is most likely the rear wing. But do you feel that with Hamilton almost pointing fingers at Red Bull, he's maybe adopting some tactics in the past used by the likes of Nico Rosberg, more mind games to get inside Red Bull's head, or at least attempt to? And if that is the case, could Hamilton possibly use that to his advantage to get ahead of Red Bull in future races?
You could perceive it as that, yeah. But personally, I don't think someone of Lewis's standards and calibers will use sort of mind games to win a world championship. He's won 7 before, and admittedly, throughout the races and throughout his time in Formula One, he has been known to sort of throw up stuff like this and not necessarily point fingers, but just gently almost point out to the audiences watching that this is happening. We know how good Lewis is of a driver, but when he was dominating, when we see over the past 3-4 years of Lewis dominance, there's a lot of haters saying that it's just the car. The car is what is lifting Hamilton to this glory and to the standards that he's at the moment. But when Hamilton's now on the back foot and he's saying that it's just the car that's happening to Verstappen, there's people defending Verstappen saying it's not the car, it's just him as a driver. But you don't win a Formula One world title, constructors or driver's title without having the package and the car underneath you as a driver. Obviously, you need the required skill and the talent as a driver, but in terms of mind games towards this, I don't think it will play too much of an effect into Red Bull's head, I guess, because they know what they need to do. They know that they need consistency with Max, consisting that, well, Perez is sort of around the podium places each race, which he's doing, and that in the end, Red Bull managed to match these and, in fact, probably outscore Mercedes in every single race from now on, then they will be the constructors and the world championship for drivers. So in terms of mind games, Red Bull, they are at the strongest point they've been for a long time. You'd say probably since they won their last title. In fact, Red Bull have been the strongest they've been. So in terms of mind games, it won't play into too much of an effect. But Lewis, you can see that after the race, his team radio was saying how it's fine, we've done a good job. We just need to keep collecting these points and hope that something else will happen in the future. They'll have a track that's more strong suited to them. But if this keeps happening in the few races that you see a Hamilton second and a Verstappen first in 2 or 3 races, that's when Mercedes have to get worried that this title is slipping away from them, because it's definitely not immutable for Mercedes to come back for a title charge. But with the lack of upgrades and with Red Bull's rear wing, it seems very difficult to do.
And Chris, with the comments just made by Harry suggesting the fact that no mind games are really going to come into this fact, we've seen in 2018, especially, I'd like to highlight, Ferrari looked like the championship challengers. They looked like they were going to take the championship fight. And then it was one single mistake by Sebastian Vettel at the German Grand Prix that year, which almost signaled.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah.
I know how much you adore that incident, but it was almost the turning point in the season for Ferrari that year. And that then shifted into a series of Mercedes dominance.
Yeah. It's something which it doesn't take much for something to be turned straight on its head. Not gonna lie, I think a lot of us thought of that of Baku when Max Verstappen went into the wall. We thought, oh, this is a twist in the tail of the championship, only for that to then be nullified by Lewis Hamilton going off. It's like, oh, we're back on track. It's there are loads of races left to go, and because of that, there's loads of variables that can go wrong. Loads of things statistically. And by law of probability, something is going to happen at some point. It could be something like Bottas and Verstappen hitting each other, and then Hamilton winning the race. It could be something like that, or something else. There is a lot that can happen. It's just a case of when.
Oh, could I also add to that with, Hamilton seems to always come strong second half of the season, and then when he did that in 2018, 2017. To beat Sebastian Vettel, Vettel and Ferrari sort of, went off and they didn't have the pace. But every single year since even 2014, Red Bull always comes strong second half of the season. Because we've seen that where Verstappen's, won in Mexico, had really good races right at the end. And even if Hamilton can pull out the bag and have his amazing second half, Red Bull always keep improving. So it's going to be whether Hamilton can really up his game and whether Mercedes can keep up, but also whether Red Bull can keep on that trend of them always getting better at the end of the season.
And especially, I suppose, in the fact that some of the later races in the season, such as Mexico, Brazil, tracks where Red Bull have been dominant at since 2017 due to the fact that their package just means that the circuit works better for them. The high altitude of Mexico and Brazil just being a Red Bull circuit that we've come to know over the past few years. With circuits like that possibly being in doubt due to the pandemic, are Red Bull making the necessary changes at the minute in order to possibly counteract missing races where they would make up for good pace?
Yeah, I mean, it could be something like that. I mean, there are some intriguing tracks in the future of the season, aren't there? Which are going to be one that I'm particularly looking out for is Silverstone. A circuit which I've always thought like Mercedes is sort of it's the home Grand Prix, and well, one could argue so is Red Bulls because they're not far away. But I've always seen Mercedes going well there, and of course Verstappen has had shouts. And I mean, he won one of the races last season, didn't he, at Silverstone, I believe, or someone correct me if I'm wrong. But but seeing how that Red Bull is now, I can easily picture Verstappen winning that now. I really can.
Especially if the temperatures mimic last year at the 70th anniversary Grand Prix as well, because Verstappen really did get cocky at that race.
Yes, he did. Yes, that was a very, very intriguing moment, very interesting moment. But then, of course, when you look at Silverstone, after that's Hungary. I mean, we all know what happened with the Mercedes Red Bull last time there. But with Verstappen and Hamilton catching at the end, with this different Red Bull now, that might not happen. Again, there's loads of things that can happen.
We'll just have to wait and see. We've got another race in Austria where Red Bull could pull some more points easily back, given their pace last weekend, and with Silverstone coming up and Verstappen doing extremely well last time we went to Silverstone, taking the race win ahead of both Mercedes. That is an option. But as we have said, it was Verstappen, Hamilton and Bottas all making up the podium, with Sergio Perez in fourth. Lando Norris finished fifth, ahead of Carlos Sainz in sixth for Ferrari. Charles Leclerc came from the back of the grid to finish seventh after an incident with Pierre Gasly, which set the Frenchman out of the race on the first lap. Lance Stroll took eighth place with Fernando Alonso in ninth, and Yuki Tsunoda took a sole point for Alpha Tauri. Now, moving on from the top fight in the championship to someone who's almost in no man's land at the minute, Harry. Lando Norris has had an amazing season as it stands so far. He's been outperforming Daniel Ricciardo comfortably, to the point where for some time in this championship race, He was in third. I believe he's still in fourth ahead of Valtteri Bottas. Correct me if I'm wrong. But once again, it was just a race where Norris was on his own. No one to challenge him, but no one to challenge. It's a bit of an odd one for McLaren.
Yeah, we look at the McLaren car and we saw at the start of the season that we would predict it's capable of podiums occasionally, and that if Ricciardo gets on form, that he'll challenge and push that McLaren up to fight with Ferrari. And at the moment, the McLaren-Ferrari battle is still raging on, and the only reason why McLaren aren't ridiculously far ahead, you'd think, is probably Ricciardo's points. Ferrari are working very well as a team, with Sainz and Leclerc both picking up very sort of equal amount of points. But Lando Norris is someone who came into Formula One from F2 as an unknown, but a British driver, and we all gave him support initially. And ever since that first year, he's been growing and growing stronger in that McLaren. And you'd never really think back to the last time Lando Norris, you could say, had a terrible performance or had a bad race in the McLaren. I think that teammates going into it, Sainz, when he was Norris's teammate, he battled hard with him. They were very close, and it was an interesting dynamic to see. Of course, Norris, we know what he's like off the track. He's a bubbly, fun character, and one that a lot of people have gained attention for. So having that sort of backing, I guess, would probably help Lando in the future. But whether this McLaren at the moment is reflective of his performance, or whether he's outperforming it, or maybe Ricciardo's underperforming it, is yet to be known, obviously. But as a general, I think that we can say that Norris is quite an underrated driver, because he is, I believe, as you said, fourth still in the championship, which is a massive feat, especially in the McLaren, which is touted to be the third, maybe on some occasions, fourth fastest car on the grid. So we know Norris has promising potential. It's just whether he'll stick it out of McLaren, if McLaren will get better, and we could see him fighting regularly for podiums and pushing further up the grid is yet to be known, but hopefully something I'd like to see in the future.
And Merisse, on the other side of the garage, Daniel Ricciardo. I hate to seem like I'm constantly berating Daniel Ricciardo. He's in a new car. But Carlos Sainz has got up to speed in the Ferrari. Sebastian Vettel has arguably got up to speed in the Aston Martin, and Fernando Alonso has got up to speed in the Alpine. All of them are performing well. But Ricciardo performing well at the French Grand Prix, it is almost a good contrast between his levels of consistency, because one minute he's stuck in 14th battling with the likes of the Alfa Romeos, and this weekend being outqualified by the Williams of George Russell. But then at some weekends he's up there fighting with Lando Norris, taking it to the Ferraris and scoring the points that McLaren need. What do you think we can pinpoint this performance issue to?
I mean, Daniel's had a really tough season, hasn't he? He's not been consistent at all. And, the first few races you can put it down to getting used to the car. But as you said, all these other drivers who've moved have settled in really well. And we know Daniel's team hopped a bit from Red Bull to Renault, now McLaren. But, you can similarly argue that Carlos has done the exact same thing. So there really is no excuse to Ricciardo's performance. And some people are saying that McLaren's really hard to, get used to. It's not his driving style. But drivers should be able to adapt. And, for McLaren to have a solid P3 in this championship, they need him up there. And he was making his way up. He had really good pace, was behind George, and then he had that power unit issue. But, qualifying is really poor compared to Lando when he's nearly a second off his teammate. And his teammate is legitimately up there, sort of fighting Mercedes and Red Bull. He's in the mix. He's making an impact into whether, Bottas and Perez can fight in the lead. So, with both Ferrari drivers fighting up there and being able to both score points, Ricciardo needs to improve. And honestly, because people had such high expectations of him, he's really not done that well this season. And because he's such a bubbly character, everyone wants him to do well and they're willing him on. But it's got to a point in the season now where it's just nobody knows whether he's going to ever actually get to grips with that car, because he's had multiple different types of tracks to do it on. And Norris has proved that car is good at every single track. He's not finished lower than P8 this season. So I have no idea what's going on with Ricciardo. And you know, we've had maybe 2 races he's had good results at. That was, I think, Imola and France. And that's not enough right now for this team, because Ferrari are, you know, charging hard even when they fall to the back of the grid like they did yesterday. They climbed back up and got solid points.
I'll also add, if I may, on that, in this race, Danny Rick was 40 plus seconds behind Lando, I believe, at the end of this race. And I think I said it on this podcast at Imola, like, you know, like these poor performances was to say what happened again. And I think I said the same thing again on another podcast, which one I can't remember. My apologies. And I'm going to say it again. It's happening again. So again, I agree. Like, what is happening? Don't know. But he's only had, in the 8 races that we've had, 1 race where he's finished ahead of Lando, and that was in Spain. He finished 6th. Only 1. You know, so something isn't right. In my opinion, maybe he should ditch the happy-go-lucky, smiley attitude and go all in on something serious. Try something new. You know, if it might play out for him. You know.
Now, Chris, it's actually good that you're here being IndyCar editor for Downforce Radio, because I don't want to stir the pot or anything.
Right.
But Pato O'Ward is going to be given a McLaren test at the end of this year. Now, I'm not trying to say that an IndyCar driver will be promoted to Formula One, but my point is that the point I'm trying to make here is McLaren have several other drivers on their books. They've got Ricciardo on a 3-year deal. There are going to be multiple breakout clauses in that contract. If there are other drivers around that McLaren could pick up, whether it's from another series or more likely from the junior categories or from another Formula One team, if Ricciardo cannot pick up the pace by the end of this year, when he's had 23 races in the car and he's still qualifying 13th or 12th, will they opt to stick around with him or possibly even look elsewhere?
I mean, they could look elsewhere. I mean, if I would be best to ask for Pato O'Ward's sake, because I like Pato O'Ward and he has proven to be a race winner in IndyCar in a series which all cars are sort of relatively level. So he's done very well there. I believe he's the championship leader. He's won 2 races. He was the first one to win 2 races this season. And then Alex Palou did the same thing last time out. And of course he's got that test drive. He deserves it. And at the same time, in his junior category, I believe he qualified on pole over a 10-race season. In his Indy Lights, he qualified on pole 7 times in a 10-race season. So he can bring out those laps when he needs to. And seeing how Danny Rick's doing, maybe Zach Brown and co might want to tap him through. I'm not so sure that will happen, because I think he's probably having too much fun in IndyCar. It's a different mindset over there. But it would be intriguing, wouldn't it?
So I have a quick question for you. Sorry to interrupt, Will. Do you think that because, you know, F1 driver as good as Ricciardo, because of how difficult he's finding it to adapt to the McLaren, would an IndyCar driver find it even harder to adapt? Or do you think it would maybe be easier because he has no other, you know, Formula One car experience to compare it to?
Formula One drivers who have gone to IndyCar have said that IndyCars are harder to drive because there is no power steering or very little. The cars are heavier, there's less power. The aerodynamics of them are miles different compared to a Formula One car. So I would imagine he might get in it and go, oh, this is different, but he might find it easy. He might. You know, these are racing drivers, that they'll take these challenges and they probably will do right. And I think Pato O'Ward, being as young as he is, he's 22, 23 years of age, I think he'll relish the opportunity. And if he goes into that test with like a not so serious attitude, he might light up some interesting light bulbs in the McLaren board. And it might make Daniel Ricciardo think twice. Maybe. I mean, I do like Pato O'Ward, and if he was to be a driver in that, I think that would be very interesting. You know, he's really, really, really good. I mean, I'm sounding so bland saying that, but I think he would find the car to drive probably a bit easier than people think.
And I'm just double checking this, but I believe in 2019, when Mahavir Raghunathan exited Formula 2 for the Austrian GP weekend, it was actually Pato O'Ward who came in to replace him at MP Motorsport for Formula 2.
And Power Wars already done a test, hasn't he? He did a test with Red Bull, I think, at one point. I couldn't tell you the year that happened, but he has done a test. So he roughly knows what the cars are like. So stepping into a McLaren, he might be thinking, trying to take what he's learned from there and put it into what he's done now. So it might be even easier for him to put something good in that McLaren.
Well, there we go. I think, guys, we've managed to stir up a bit of a rumour there. Possibly Pato O'Ward to McLaren, maybe sometime in the future.
Please, that would be funny.
Well, looking at their championship rivals this year, Harry, meanwhile, Ferrari, on the other hand, certainly look to have a stable lineup that they will be using for definite throughout Sainz and Leclerc's contract, because despite having a mistake on the first lap, which saw both himself knocked to the back of the field and Pierre Gasly taken out of the Grand Prix, Charles Leclerc still managed to come back for 7th place and ultimately outscore McLaren.
Yeah, in the end, it was a good weekend for Ferrari. We saw, of course, in France, their race pace was atrocious. And you look at Austria, it does have a lot of different dynamics. It's obviously more of a power track than France, which would have been interesting for Ferrari to try and improve on their race pace with. But clearly there was something that has worked this weekend for the Scarlet Red cars. So Sainz has done very well in the adaptation, I guess, towards Ferrari from McLaren. And we know the ability of Charles Leclerc. But one thing I do always think about with Ferrari is they've still got Mick Schumacher, obviously, in F1. They've got a ton of Ferrari young junior drivers, even like Callum Ilott with their development team. I think that with Sainz there at the moment, who wasn't obviously from the Ferrari Academy and performing so well, a lot of these younger drivers now who could potentially have a future within Formula One might get hindered by the good performances from Sainz and Leclerc. But if you're Ferrari at the moment, probably Sainz and Leclerc are extracting the maximum potential out of that car. Say P6 and P7, I doubt they probably could have got any further up because the Red Bulls, the McLaren of Norris and then the Mercedes. So it was a good weekend in general for Ferrari. Obviously, there was the lap 1 incident between Leclerc and Gasly, which I'm not going to say necessarily was someone's fault, but it was an interesting decision to call it as a racing incident and to not give anything for it. But in the end, Ferrari will be happy with their weekend, especially after the dismal performance in France. So to get that extra points as well on McLaren is a major thing. And going into next week, obviously still at the same track, Ferrari potentially could develop more and get closer towards the McLaren and Norris that they want to.
Now, I do apologise for this, Harry, and I'll get your opinion on it as well, Chris, given you're an avid Ferrari fan. But you said there that you didn't want to label anyone a blame for the incident. But I'm now going to ask you, who do you think was at blaming point for the incident on lap 1?
Oh, okay. Well, Gasly's race was ruined. I'm sorry, but it was completely ruined by the contact made from Charles Leclerc. And what would have been a suitable penalty if there was given one out to Leclerc, I'm not quite sure. Probably time penalty, maybe something in the pit lane. But you have to think that Gasly and that AlphaTauri would have been up there. They would have been in the points. And it would have made for a different result, let's say, if Gasly was still within the race. But yeah, maybe Leclerc should have been slightly more careful.
You know what? I agree with you, really. The only thing that I would say go against that is when I think on the onboard, I've only seen the onboard once or twice, but onboard of Gasly, when he was moving over to the left, he was looking in his right mirror, so he wasn't actually looking to his left whilst he was going left. So I think maybe that is what sort of changed, because if he was looking left, maybe he wouldn't have driven left. There might have been that. But that's my view on it.
Merisse, let's get your opinion in this little debate here. In terms of Pierre Gasly and Charles Leclerc, what do you think about the incident as a whole?
Yeah, unfortunately, Chris, I do think it was Leclerc's fault. He then sort of replicated that with Raikkonen, later on in the race. And not only did he take out Pierre Gasly, Pierre then couldn't stop for the hairpin, spun Giovinazzi, which then gave Latifi a puncture. So it was sort of like Charles Leclerc caused like dominoes through the grid up until that turn. So yeah, I think it was poor from Charles to do that. And he had a good recovery drive, but he shouldn't have had to have a recovery drive. But yeah, the FIA didn't investigate it. It's lap one, what can you really do? I think they should have at least had a little bit of a look of it, because he did take out Pierre Gasly completely from the race. And they were running in good points, but yeah, unfortunately, as much as I love Charles, it was his fault, in my opinion.
But don't say unfortunately to me anyway, because I agree. I think in a way that I think it was his fault. I'm just thinking that Gasly bit when he wasn't looking in that left view mirror at the time, possibly. I mean, I'd have to look at the two things side by side properly, like on board with Charles and on board with Pierre, just to see where they were when Gasly was looking in which mirror. Because that's the only thing I could think of, which is probably what made them not investigate any further. That's the only thing I could think of. Because unless it is a lap one incident, it did seem very lenient.
And also the incident with Yuki Tsunoda in qualifying. Before we touch on the race of AlphaTauri, he impeded Valtteri Bottas going into the first corner, Harry. But realistically, Tsunoda overall had a pretty good weekend in comparison to other races this season. Notably, he is under pressure. He hasn't had the season we thought he would be having. And AlphaTauri as a whole are almost one man standing in this championship fight against other teams, because Tsunoda hasn't been performing as the team want him to be. But is Austria a step in the right direction, finishing with a point at the end of it after everything that happened?
Yeah, you can say that it was certainly a step forward for Yuki, but the Constructors' Championship is massive this year. Obviously, AlphaTauri at the moment battling with Aston Martin, but it's not necessarily AlphaTauri versus Aston Martin. It seems to be Gasly versus Aston Martin at the moment. Yuki, as a rookie going into Formula One, it's always going to be difficult, and the rookies this year have not really done anything spectacular. Obviously, the two in the Hasses, but they can't do too much. But in terms of Tsunoda's performances, it's up and down. We looked at Bahrain and we thought, wow, this is a potential. We could have something on our hands here if Yuki Tsunoda with in flying pace, and even pre-season around Bahrain, he was flying as well. But ever since then, it's sort of like, well, I've done my bit in Bahrain, and then he's had a very quiet, sort of tailed off a bit. And the only real headlines we ever see from Tsunoda at the moment tend to be him swearing in the cockpit, and his team radio messages all the time over the race. But a point is a step in the right direction, and hopefully, well, considering Gasly's retirement, hopefully that if Gasly has a better performance next week, AlphaTauri can pick up a solid double point score. But during the race, Tsunoda did get caught up in that train, and alongside a lot of drivers, I know that Vettel was in, Alonso was leading it for a while, and it was a massive train that Tsunoda couldn't get out of. And in the end, a point is okay for AlphaTauri. They could have been more. They probably had the pace and the car to finish a lot higher up than they did. But it's an underwhelming point, but it's a step in the right direction, I guess, for Tsunoda.
Now, moving on to, as you all know, my favourite segment in the show, On This Day, where we take a look at different events that happened in Formula One history on the day of recording. Now, today is June 28th. And unfortunately, this did not actually fall on the Grand Prix weekend of the French Grand Prix, because this would have been very satisfying. But in 1964, Brabham Racing Team, the team started by, of all people, Sir Jack Brabham, won their first Grand Prix at the French Grand Prix at Rouen today in 1964. But the question that I ask you three today, if we go to Chris, then Harry, and then Merisse, is who was the driver who won that Grand Prix?
That's easy. I know this because I love this man.
And Chris, would you like to enlighten us with the answer?
Genius in motorsport, both over in the States and over here. Drivers, like sort of unsung. It's Dan Gurney.
There we go. Anyway, moving back to the present after a little bit of fun. Fernando Alonso had a little bit of fun on the Radio Merisse. He was saying that no matter where he qualified, he was finally enjoying driving the Alpine. And it's good to see Fernando Alonso starting to get back into the stride of things, because at the beginning of the season, he did struggle a bit getting used to the car. But now he is comfortably almost the head of that team, scoring points, getting stuff done, and ultimately just having fun like he wanted to when he came back.
I think it's really nice to see Alonso actually enjoying himself, because we all know the horrible time he had at McLaren where he was just so frustrated all the time with, the engine and the team as a whole. But it's so nice to see him come back, perform well and be happy whilst he's doing it. It's the Alonso we wanted to see back, and he's had a top 10 finish the last 3 races. He's, got to grips with that car now. And even with Esteban signing that contract, it's not, put Alonso off in any way that he thinks the team are going to favour Esteban, or that, they're putting all their faith in one driver. Alonso is still, getting the results and proving that he deserves to be there.
And on the other side of the Alpine garage, Chris, it's Esteban Ocon who needs to prove that he deserves to be there, because ultimately he's had a very good season so far, up until arguably the last race at France. And now finishing 14th is not where he really needs to be, especially finishing 17th in qualifying behind the Williams of Nicholas Latifi. With a 3-year deal, he needs to be performing better than that.
Yeah, you'd think that after signing a contract, you feel a bit more happy about yourself, because I've seen it in multiple sports that when you're racing or playing sports on your last year of your contract, you feel a lot of pressure on you, a heck of a lot. It's hard to do things on as it is now, a 1-year contract. Now he's signed something, you think, okay, this is good. I'm comfortable now. I'm here for 3 years. Of course, there may be breakup clauses, but I'm here for 3 years. And he hasn't exactly lived up to it. I know it's only been a few races, but it's a bit interesting. In the first 5 races of the season, Ocon finished better than Alonso 4 out of 5 times. In the last 3 races, he has not done better than Alonso at all. And in fact, Alonso has finished in the points 3 races in a row. So almost like a role reversal. And maybe, I don't know what it is. Maybe it was that contract signing. Maybe it was getting a bit ahead of himself. The complacency effect, possibly.
Well, I mean, he's got a few more races this season, 15, to prove that that 3-year extension is what he needs. But one driver, Harry, who, let's face it, isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and right now doesn't deserve to be going anywhere anytime soon, Lance Stroll. He performed very well this weekend. He made it to Q3, outperformed Sebastian Vettel in the Aston Martin, and started off the race strong, but fell back towards the end. Either way, he got 8th place, scored 4 points, and it's just a strong weekend for the Canadian.
A very strong weekend for Stroll. A massive improvement, probably one of the best race weekends of the season for him. I'm a massive, as you know, Vettel fan, so I watch Aston Martin and I watch Stroll with a lot of intent. And during the race, I think that Aston Martin's strategy for the past 3 races anyway, Monaco, Baku and France, has been superb, probably the best on the grid. This week it wasn't as such. I think that Vettel didn't have the tyres at the end, and Stroll also seemed to drop off a bit. The Aston Martins, they looked to be kinder on the tyres in the past few races, but it didn't really work out, whether that was setup wise or maybe it was just the temperatures on the track. But overall, they did still score points, obviously, with Stroll. It was disappointing to see Vettel fall off of the race. He was in about P9, P10, stuck in the train, obviously, that Stroll was in, and Stroll was just about leading, really, in P6. But as an overall, I think that Aston Martin will have to look forward instead of reflecting on this week too much. Stroll's had a very good weekend. He's still behind Vettel in the championship, but the points is what matters, and the points obviously in fighting with AlphaTauri. They're still behind AlphaTauri, I believe, by 1 or 2 points, but it will be an interesting battle to see whether Gasly and Tsunoda will pick themselves up. And Aston Martin as a whole, are a team that I wish the best success for because of Vettel and Stroll being there. So as an overall, it wasn't the best weekend that Aston Martin could have hoped for, but Stroll did enough, and I think he managed to score decent points, and Aston Martin should be happy with his performance. Vettel probably won't be happy with his performance, however, on the other side of the garage, but hopefully coming into next week, getting the more data from the race weekend, Aston Martin should improve, hopefully.
Now, ultimately, coming as we do near to the end of the show, we always get to the teams at the back of the grid. One of those teams is Williams Racing, one of 3 drivers at the back of the grid, Alfa Romeo, Haas, and Williams. But it now appears, Merisse, that Williams Racing are possibly faster than Alfa Romeo. Because when we take a look at the numbers, we've got Nicholas Latifi in 16th in qualifying and George Russell in 11th. Just, I think it was 8 thousandths off of a Q3 slot. Or correct me if I'm wrong there, but obviously Kimi Raikkonen in 18th as well. Not what the Finn needs, inarguably a critical season if he's going to stay on in Formula One. We'll get to that later though. But it does look like Williams are now faster than Alfa Romeo, and they are the leaders of the Group C class.
Yeah, I think qualifying definitely suggests that, Williams have really improved that, and George has been proving it time and time again with, Q2 and nearly Q3 appearances. In the races, I still think that Alfa Romeo, in the hands of Kimi, is at least better than Latifi. George Russell performs in that car so well, he outperforms it, if anything. So I'm trying to figure out whether it's Williams really improving or whether George Russell is just so quick and consistent in that car that he's making it look really good. But, you said Latifi still out qualifying, one of the Alfa Romeos. So it does look good for them, especially qualifying. And they can be up there like Russell proved. And they are the only, team from the back of the grid who look like they can currently score points. Alfa Romeo have had a couple, but George being nearly even P7 in the race, suggesting that they can get those points. And it was on merit. It wasn't because people had DNF'd or, things like that, apart from Gasly. But George still would have been in the points without that. So Williams have really seemed to make a big step forward.
One thing I'll say that is, you could say this is sort of like a spin on that, is that remember where we are. We're in Austria, a circuit which is a quick lap. So in terms of quick laps, the deltas between the ranges are closer. We saw it with in Q2 and how many times within 0.3 of each other, within 0.3 in Q2. It was a lot. I think it was 12 drivers within 0.4 of the quickest team. So in terms of that, it's a bit easier for teams to try and leapfrog another because of this delta. A mistake is more costly because of it. And at the same time, Austria is a circuit which is, I would say, fairly power dependent, and that Williams with the Mercedes versus the Alfa with a Ferrari engine, which still, okay, it's improved, but it's still a bit lackluster compared to a Mercedes. Those things added together to make this the best opportunity for a Williams to actually do well. The same thing could happen next week, weather dependent, of course. The same thing could happen. That's the one thing I would say. If when we return to other tracks, like when we return to Silverstone or Hungary or something, I think things may return to normal. Don't take my word for it, but I just think the track had a play on it.
And Harry, at the end of the day, with the Williams performance, the biggest loser out of everything was George Russell once again. I think the entire Formula One community almost breathed a sigh of disappointment in the fact that George Russell's luck has once again escaped him. He was in the points and his car gave up. I believe Williams described it as a power unit. They had to constantly keep on topping up hydraulic pressure, I think it was, something along those lines. They had to keep on pitting him and eventually just called it a day and brought him into the pits.
Yeah, it was really horrible to see. It was hard to watch for George, especially when he got out of the car and started hugging all of his mechanics, because in the end, it wasn't really anyone's fault. It was was horrible to see. Of course, we saw team radio throughout the race towards Russell talking about temperatures and staying out of the dirty air of other cars in front of him, and he was in that train, so that probably did not help him throughout the race. He was in the train for, well, the majority of his running while he was in around P8. But when it comes to Russell, he has no luck. It's truly mind-blowing how many times he's been on the verge of getting points for this Williams, scoring his first points in the car, and something goes wrong, whether it's a driver error or whether it's a mechanical problem. It's really hard to watch for George, and you think someday surely these points will have to come for Russell in the Williams. Of course, he did score for Mercedes in the Bahrain race, but he wants it for the Williams team, who haven't scored points in a long time. So it's definitely hard to watch, and I know that a lot of people were watching the race when that happened, were absolutely gutted for poor George. And this weekend, I think Chris made a brilliant point in how the track, the lap is so short, so the cars' gaps between them will be a lot less significant to a longer track. So that's why Williams probably favoured the track more than others. But it still doesn't, despite the fact that Russell was on form this weekend. He had a brilliant qualifying, could have been in Q3, was so close to it, and it was heartbreak to watch him in the race, come out of that car and look so dejected once again in that Williams that he couldn't score points in, but still he had a brilliant race. And of course, we probably got my driver of the day vote. It was hard to see him get out of the car, but that time will come for George. He's a talented driver. We all know he's got the capabilities of being in the Mercedes, especially for next year potentially. So hopefully there are lights at the end of the tunnel for George. We know that. We know how talented he is. So these points for Williams, they will come. It's just, it was horrible to watch this weekend to see him so dejected.
Yeah, I think we all echo your points there, Harry, because George Russell really does need a points finish for Williams sooner or later, and luckily he does have another shot at it next week. But moving on from the team that we've been comparing them with, Williams, to Alfa Romeo, Kimi Raikkonen, he had a poor qualifying, Chris, but a strong race in the end of it. It was a bit of an odd weekend because 1 minute he was 18th and the next minute he finished 11th in the Grand Prix and was chasing down Vettel right at the end of it. So is there something going on with the car? It's better in race pace than it is qualifying pace? Or is it just Raikkonen having a poor day at the office on Saturday?
Ferrari's sister team. So what did both Ferrari and Alfa Romeo do? Have a bad Saturday and an alright Sunday, didn't they? But like, yeah, he caught up to those gaggle of cars, didn't he? Towards the end, he had a good chance and all sorts. I will be honest, I didn't see that part of the race as much. But yeah, it's a solid finish. I mean, I don't really know what else to say for him. But regarding his teammate, he sort of tailed off a bit more towards the end, didn't he? I think when looking at his times towards the end of the delta between him and Kimi was sort of getting wider and wider. Some people will think, have they been saying that Giovinazzi might lose his seat or something? Is that what some people have been reading? Like might try something else? But that might be a bit just knee-jerk reaction, though.
Well, I think you'll enjoy this next point, Chris, because I'll get your opinions on all of this. Callum Ilott coming in for Austria 2 for the Austrian Grand Prix. He will be taking on FP1 duties alongside his previous teammate at UNI Virtuosi, Guan Yu Zhou, who's taking on it on the Alpine role for FP1. But Callum Ilott is a driver who has, I think this will be his second outing in the Alfa Romeo, as well as doing multiple tests with Ferrari at Fiorano in the 2018 car. And I believe there are a couple more tests lined up for their young drivers at some point. But Chris, with obviously you being our Ferrari expert in this panel, as we've mentioned before, and then we'll go on to Harry and then Merisse. The final point today is Alfa Romeo are a team which are in my opinion, desperate need of freshening up. Like Haas were after they had the same lineup for 4 years, I think it was. This is their third year with Raikkonen and Giovinazzi. Do you feel with the likes of Callum Ilott and Théo Pourchaire, it could be a time of change in 2022 for the team?
That's a very good question. It's difficult. I mean, I'm of the belief that because 2022 is coming, they'll want an experienced driver to have that knowledge, and there's no more experienced driver than Kimi right now, is there, in Formula One? And you want a guy like that to go into that new car and sort of do the shakedowns, do the analysis, and be like, okay, yeah, this, and this, and this, X, A, B, C, all the way to Z. He'll do that a lot better than Ilott and Porsche or whoever would do. He'll do that better than them. So I think for that reason, Raikkonen might still be in. Having said that, he is a bit long in the tooth, isn't he now? It's almost quite remarkable how old he is and he's still able to drive these cars. But with Giovinazzi, I kind of feel sorry for him because I actually don't mind him. He's a driver, like, if you had to give him a class grade, he gets a 6.5 out of 10 all the time. He's just there. There aren't that many times where I see him do something horrendous. Equally, there aren't that many times that he's been absolutely outstanding and touted for the next seat up. It's a weird one. So it's almost like they're in limbo right now. And for me, because 2022 is on the horizon, if you're in limbo, I would stay with what I've got. Or at least keep one.
And Harry?
Well, last year I thought that Ilott was robbed of a seat in Formula One, to be honest, either in Haas or Alfa Romeo. I would have loved to see him in the sport this year because obviously runner-up in the F2 Championship to Mick Schumacher. He, a young Brit within the sport, everyone's always going to take. Ferrari links as well. You thought he was almost nailed on for an Alfa Romeo or a Haas seat, but in the end, they went with the experience and the money, realistically, those two teams. And Ilott now having taken sort of a year off from racing, it sort of puts him slightly on more of a back foot than he was before because of the time he's had off. But in terms of what Chris said as well, with these regulation changes, it's a massive thing to have an experienced driver who's known the team as well, not just the car beforehand. So in terms of Callum Ilott getting a seat for next year, it's going to be difficult for him to find one. And on the lines of Teo Porcher, he's an incredibly young driver, someone who I'm older than Anne. So that's horrible to hear anyway. The fact that I'm older than him and I'm only 18. So he's got absolutely no experience of Formula One machinery, but we know he's got talent. The question is any team going to take the risk and go for the talent and the youth instead of the experience for these new regulations and see what these young drivers can do? But I would personally be very surprised to see Callum Ilott within Formula One next year. As much as I would love to have seen him in it this year, I'd be surprised if he got a call up next year, unfortunately.
And Merisse, let's get your opinion on this.
Yeah, so I was quite surprised last year when Alfa Romeo stuck to their two drivers, because Haas went the complete opposite direction to get two new rookies. And I guess you can think of it of experience versus, the hunger of these young drivers. Because you've got to think, how much does Kimi really want to push Alfa Romeo to do better and get points and improve the car? Because, in my opinion, I don't think he's one to stay really late at night pushing the team, saying, what can we do to do better? He's probably at home with a beer or something. So I'm not sure whether, obviously he's got all that experience to add to the team, but I think the addition of a young driver such as Ilott would add so much more in terms of hunger and pushing the team forward. And because he's had that break, he'd be even more determined to, improve their car. And even with new regulations, I'm not sure how much they'd miss. Kimi knows the team, I get that, but I think with it being sort of a completely new car, no team has an advantage of knowing anything about that car previously. So I don't think that getting a rookie for 2022 would be that much of a disadvantage as it would have been for previous years, where it's just a development on a current car.
Well, I think that will make the question of the day then. If we're up to you at home running the Alfa Romeo team, would you choose to keep Kimi Raikkonen and Antonio Giovinazzi, or bring in a fresh pair of eyes such as Teo Bocher or Callum Ilott? Thank you very much for doing that. Let us know on our social media pages or down in the comments on YouTube, guys. I think that's pretty much everything covered, all of the good bits and all of the bad bits of the Styrian Grand Prix weekend. Thank you very much, Chris, Harry, and Merisse, for joining me. And thank you very much to you guys at home for tuning in to Maximum Downforce, the Styrian Grand Prix podcast. Remember that next week is the Austrian Grand Prix podcast, so we will be returning for the third week in a row before we have a nice 2-week break before Silverstone. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. Remember, you can check out all of our social media at Downforce Radio on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as the website downforceradio.uk to check out all the latest news articles and listen to the radio station as well. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day or evening wherever you're listening from, and goodbye.
Go, go, go! And it's happened immediately! This is amazing! The worst start for a Grand Prix